Getting the right tyre pressure is simple, right? Just pump your tyres up to the range recommended on the sidewall and away you go. But turns out it's not quite that straightforward. Here's how to get the right pressure for your road tyres.
Becca, I can feel the fury of the comments already. This is certainly a weirdly thorny topic, and I think it'd be good to say from the start that we don't expect everyone to start messing with their pressures if they don't want to.
Yeah, I agree. If you're happy with the pressures that you've been using for years, then we're not about to force you to change them. And if you do find this info useful, then give the video a like, subscribe to the channel as it really helps us out, and you can even click on the bell icon to get notified when we post a new video.
Right then, Becca, I think it'd be good to start with what the tyre actually has to deal with, as it's important to take all of these factors into consideration before selecting a tyre pressure.
Absolutely agree there. Tyres grip the road so you can steer and, of course, go forward. On a road bike, they provide the only significant suspension cushioning you from bumps and holes. They have to be tough enough not to puncture too easily, but thin and light enough to roll well. All these things are affected by pressure, as well as the design and construction of the tyre itself. When you sit on a bike, your tyres compress. If they compress too much, they'll writhe and squirm on the rims, making the bike harder to control, increasing rolling resistance and putting you at a risk of dreaded pinch punctures. If they don't compress enough, the ride will be harsh and there'll be so little rubber on the road that the grip will be reduced.
Yeah, somewhere in between these extremes, there must be an ideal compromise. How do you find it?
Good question. Well, there's one more factor that's really crucial, and that is your weight. Engineer Frank Berto, who investigated this issue for Bicycling magazine back in the late 1980s, came up with a formula based on the weight on each tyre. He reckoned that the happy medium involved a tyre being compressed 15% of its height.
I'm not going to lie, that sounds really, really tricky to measure.
Yeah, and as a recreational and touring rider, Berto was probably more interested in comfort than speed, so this idea is controversial because Berto recommends lower tyre pressures than most of us actually use.
Yeah, so going through his method for me at 62 kg, I'm supposed to be running about 63 psi in the rear tyre and about 58 in the front tyre. For the 25mm tyres that I actually use for general riding and racing, that seems awfully low.
It does, doesn't it? What would you normally run?
About 80 psi in the dry.
Well, you've given different pressures for the front and the rear tyre. Why is that?
Yeah, so your front and your rear tyre actually carry a different load. To calculate the difference, you'll need to measure the load on each wheel. Put a bathroom scale under one wheel and enough wooden blocks, books or old magazines under the other to level the bike. Lean very slightly against a wall to steady yourself and sit in your normal position on the bike. Get someone else to read the scales for you, repeat the process, and you've got your distribution.
Just like that. There's going to be a lot of people running into some issues with their other halves at this rate.
Yeah,
we're used to that with cycling, so
Yeah.
this is fine.
Yeah,
Get in the bathroom.
To be honest, the method doesn't really take into consideration you moving your body weight around on the bike like you would when you get out of the saddle on a climb, or even the weight transfer to the front wheel when under braking.
Not perfect then, and it has to be said that the method has received some criticism, with engineer and author of the bicycle wheel, Jobs Brandt, suggesting that the Berto method isn't appropriate for general riding as the risk of punctures at those low pressures is just too great. He suggests running equal pressures front and rear, and by the sounds of it, he'd recommend quite a bit more pressure than Berto, but at least it is a pretty good starting point to work from.
But before you take that advice and think, oh no, I'm not going to do that. Before you go maxing the pressure because you think it'll be faster, Bicycle Quarterly magazine did some tests that revealed that there was no speed advantage in pumping tyres up very hard. It was already known that when measured on a smooth drum, rolling resistance didn't actually decline much when the tyre was inflated beyond a certain pressure.
Well, Jan Hine, Bicycle Quarterly's editor, suggests that the real-world testing indicates that when tyre pressures get too high, there's no further reduction in rolling resistance. Hine believes that you lose the suspension effect of the tyres, and that's enough to push the rolling resistance back up.
Yeah, so that's not a solution either. And then we get to the question of tubeless tyre pressures. Where do we even start with that one?
Well, as tubeless tyre tech is relatively new to the world of road cycling, we sought the advice of some of the big wheel and tyre brands such as Continental, Schwab and Hunt. And the key point that they all made actually was that the recommended pressure range that's printed on the tyre sidewall is there for a reason.
Well, that seems like simple advice, but it is a good starting point, to be fair. Hunt suggested that you take the middle ground of that range and then work out what suits the conditions that you're riding, the surface, and your weight through trial and error.
Well, generally, tubeless pressures are a little lower than a tube clincher as you remove the possibility of pinch punctures, but you can go too low on the pressures and have the tyre feel all squirmy under you, or too high and then the tyre could blow off the rim, which really isn't ideal.
To be honest, that sounds like more guesswork, so I'm going to engage my inner millennial and tell you all that there's an app for that. Mavic's My Mavic app isn't the most entertaining of apps out there, but it does the job for recommending you front and rear pressures based on some key factors such as rider and bike weight, rim width, tyre size and more.
Why didn't you just start by saying there was an app in the first place?
Well, Becca, you can't tell a bunch of millennials that on YouTube that there's an app for it. You'll lose them instantly. Anyway, between getting out the bathroom scales, doing a ton of trial and error, and popping some simple data into my phone, I kind of know which method I'm going to be using to choose my tyre pressure. There's also some really good websites to help you out. SRAM has a page where you can plug in the same data, and again, the site will give you pressures for the front and the rear wheels. There's links to both in the description below.
If you don't want to do that, then there are 5 points that we can take away. If you ride in a leisurely manner, a short commute, gentle pootling around the lanes, then you can afford to run quite low pressures for comfort.
Yeah, at the other extreme, don't bother overinflating your tyres for road races and time trials. Unless the road surface is glass smooth, you won't get any advantage. And let's face it, where are you going to find a road like that in the UK? Come on.
I'm always wishful thinking on that front. In between, you should tailor your tyre pressure to your riding style and roads. Ride in flat countries and on smooth roads, sounds amazing. Go for the lower end of the range between the Berto 15% drop figure and the range marked on your tyres.
In the hills, Brandt's advice for equal pressures front and rear is good if you like to descend quickly. I think we all love to go downhill fast, but a front wheel impact puncture at 50 miles an hour is not high on my list of things that I'm keen to try. If you're not a demon descender, you can run a softer front tyre for comfort.
Well, if you're running tubeless tyres, you have more leeway to experiment with low pressures, but you should probably still treat the Berto recommendation as a lower bound, or at least experiment carefully with pressures lower than the Berto graph actually recommends.
You know what, Becca? I think I'm just going to stick to the apps and websites to recommend my tyre pressures.
Well, if you like this video, don't forget to give us a little thumbs up and subscribe. And if you want to be notified when we post a new video, click the bell icon. Thanks for watching. See you next time.